I wrote them an email out of the blue, and they all said yes, they'd love to come talk to you, which is amazing. A's for all of them. No, yay. But I think this is a great time to talk about politics, right? If you haven't noticed, we're in the midst of election season, and I don't know about you, but I am not feeling like this is a grand celebration of democracy or a sober and serious exercise of free government. It is hard not to be anxious and depressed and maybe even a bit cynical. And I think also when oh, sorry. Okay, sorry. It's hard not to feel a bit cynical about politics. I don't know if you felt this as well. And even the experts that we talk to, I mean, it seems like they don't have a lot of insight. They can't tell us much from the polling about what's going to happen. There are a lot of people who talk about strategy and tactics, but there aren't a lot of people who talk about hope. And so when I thought, oh, what do we need to talk about now? What do we need to hear about? I thought maybe we need to talk a little bit about what we can hope for and what sort of community or political communities that we want to live in. And I immediately thought of these four amazing students that I have. And I thought that maybe they could join us in a conversation about concerns and worries about politics, but also some of the hope we might have. The first thing I want to do is just have them introduce themselves. Did I say? I'm Doug Casson. I teach up at St. Olaf in political science, but I'm also a member here at Bethel. And I'll just have Praise start us off.
Hi, everyone. Okay, can you hear me? Yeah?
You might have to push.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Praise, senior political science major from North Carolina, and I'm also Nigerian as well. What else should I say?
What are you involved in?
I'm involved in Residence Live on campus. I'm in our chapel choir. I'm also very involved in like global engagement. I worked at our study abroad office. And then we also have like a global impact committee on campus that focuses on, international affairs that I help lead. So, yeah.
Pass it over this way. Hello, everybody. My name is Emily. I'm also a senior. I am from Arden Hills, Minnesota. So that's a suburb of St. Paul, about an hour away from here. It's a very nice, lovely drive, especially at this time. I am an environmental studies and political science double major. And things I'm involved in. I'm also in our chapel choir with Praise, and I am on the student government, so I'm the environmental senator. And I also lead two other kind of environment and sustainability focused clubs on campus. So yeah, that's me.
Hi, excuse me. I'm Matthew. I'm also a senior. I'm a math and poli-sci major, and I have a statistics and data science concentration, so lots of classes. I'm in Cantry, which is the other lower level non-Oli choir
Yes, this is true.
on campus, and I also play piano, and so that's, I don't know, another bit of music that I like doing. What else do I do? Yeah, that's what I'm involved in.
Hi, I'm Madeline. I'm a senior English and political science major, and I'm from Portland, Oregon. And on campus, I play cello in the St. Olaf Orchestra. I'm an editor on the St. Olaf Messenger newspaper. I co-lead an organization with Emily, and I'm also an election engagement coordinator on campus. And so we're working hard to get everybody who's eligible to vote out to vote.
Oh yeah, I wanted to say that because of student activism, St. Olaf has the highest rating of voting percentage of voters of any college in the country. Woohoo! Yay! And so, but also, yeah, all of these guys, you can see that they're very busy. They're also all, as political science majors, really interested in politics. I think 3 out of 4 of you guys came with me to Washington, D.C. Last January to spend the month connecting with alums and visiting a lot of the various agencies around and think tanks. The first question I wanted to ask each one of my panelists is what attracts them to politics right now? I mean, why are they studying politics? Why are they actively engaged in politics? What attracts them to politics? And maybe also what repels them from politics? Start us off, Praise.
I think for me, it's honestly the engagement with people. I think a lot of politics, there's the intrigue, there's the, the scandal, the backroom situations. But for me, it's helping people, figuring out solutions in communities, and connecting bridges. Like I said, my focus is international engagement. So I'm really focused on, cultural ambassadorship and diplomacy, and figuring out how we can help people in the States see other, countries, regions of the world. I'm very interested in the Middle East and North Africa. And so I think in the future, I really want to focus on our policies in terms of that region. In terms of what repels me, I think, like I said, the intrigue, like the backroom situations, that's of course a part of politics. But I kind of am more focused on the community, building and like relationships and whatnot. So, yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I think what drew me to politics, honestly, I started really paying attention in the 2016 election when I was in high school. I couldn't vote, but everybody was talking about it. We were all keeping tabs on all of the candidates and everything, and it was just a topic of conversation in my classes that I found myself being very interested in participating in, and that just continued into my academic study today. But I really love looking at local politics, kind of an opposite of Praise here. I know people who are involved with local politics, and I just really admire the community connections that come from that. And it's really clear when people are helping others in a community setting. And so in that way, like helping people through political efforts is really attractive to me. Something that repels me, also actually similar to Praise, is the complexities of it almost feels like a game sometimes. It feels like you're watching a popularity contest play out in front of you, and that's really discouraging sometimes, especially because we know how manipulative different narratives can be, and different like advertising and propaganda tactics and things like that, and just knowing that a lot of it needs to be based in people making educated decisions for themselves. So that's why, yeah, I'm really happy that we have a lot of voters at St. Olaf who are willing to take the time and learn about the candidates they're voting for. Yeah.
Let's see. I think very similar to Emily, my kind of foray into political awareness started in the 2016 election. It's just, I think for me, it's been part of the process of learning about both history and current events as a way to both be informed and also just as a way to learn about how different like the rest of the country is. I grew up in Connecticut and then in Iowa, and those are two very different parts of the country, but there's so many other parts that are just different in so many ways, and politics is one of the ways you quantify it, and so that drew me to politics. I think another thing, I kind of am more attracted by the game aspect of it because, it's really fascinating to just watch and think about the different strategies, see what people are doing, because I don't know. So that's something that I enjoy watching. Something that repels me is probably just how, I guess, just the amount of inertia. You can have, and there are a lot of situations where there's a lot of popular support for some kind of policy position, but for whatever reason or another, it just doesn't happen because there's a lot of that machinery and a lot of the mechanisms that just don't want to change, or it takes a lot of effort and time and sometimes money to get things to change. And so that can be really frustrating. It's very hard to see it as just an instrument of popular sovereignty when it can be so inefficient. It can be so clearly serving some other ulterior motive or purpose.
Kind of similarly to these two, I think I first started getting interested in politics when I was in middle school, which would have been 2016 election. But I did grow up in a family where politics was always a conversation. My mom is a public school teacher. She teaches history, and she studied abroad in the Soviet Union. And so that was something that she talked about a lot. And so it was always kind of on my radar was how the role the government has in people's lives. And so that was relevant in my life growing up. And then as elections became more divisive, as I was in high school and then now into college, that's always been something that's interested me, is the way that we get to have a say in what happens to us. And that's really important to me, and then studying all the different things in the major, the way that the government works and how it's not as straightforward as we might think. And then kind of that's also the same thing that kind of dissuades me from politics, or that I'm a little bit wary about, is the things that play into politics that are really behind the scenes, the way that money plays into it, and the way it is like a popularity contest, and then also the way that it's dividing people. I've seen that a lot in my family, where suddenly people who really got along and now discover they have political differences, and that drives a pretty deep divide between them.
Yeah, that is really great, Madeline. We were just talking about the way in which political divisions also divide churches, right? And maybe even chase people out of churches that they feel like they would have belonged to, but these political differences separate us. There's a lot to talk about. I want to give some space for you all to ask questions or to have a back and forth conversation. I know that the students really wanted to talk and hear from you all, but I have one last question, and this question is about the way far future. I think that elections sometimes, especially elections like this, sort of narrow our scope. And at least for me, it's hard for me to imagine anything after November, right? What is going to happen? I don't know. But I wanted to ask all of these students to imagine way past November, as they become young adults, as they maybe raise families and be parts of different communities. What are you hopeful about in these new potential political communities that you're going to live in? And then maybe what scares you about those communities way down the road? Maybe Madeline, do you want to go first this time?
Okay. So going to St. Olaf is kind of a lovely place, or it's a lovely experience because I'm surrounded by people who are very civically engaged. And I am looking forward to hopefully carrying that into my future and surrounding myself with people who are civically engaged, not only voting, but going out and being parts of panels or having conversations with their neighbors about what's going on, and then educating themselves. And I think at St. Olaf, I see a lot of that, and so I'm hoping that makes me hopeful for the future that people will be engaged in politics.
I don't know. I think taking a sort of different attack to Doug's question, I think looking through history, we can see a lot of examples of political actions that didn't necessarily have as much payoff in the short term, but had a lot more payoff in the long term. And that's where you see a lot of our political realignments. For example, Nixon's Southern strategy, or Reagan's emphasis on moral issues, or more recently, the Democrats' insistence in passing Obamacare. You know, it got them clobbered in the midterms because at the moment it was not very popular, but there have been people that have been making a case that it's contributed to democratic resiliency in the past handful of elections, once that has become under threat. in the Trump era and since. So I think that those who look at history will kind of by necessity have a field further into the future view of what do we need to do, not just to remain viable in the short term for this election, for next election, but to remain a viable party in the decades to come, especially since both political parties are facing and have faced serious and perhaps even existential challenges recently.
Yeah, I think thinking about communities in the future, I hope that I will surround myself with people who are open-minded. That is the best thing you can walk into a political discussion with is an open mind. And I know a lot of people right now are afraid to share their political opinions with people they know don't agree with them. I know in my family, one side of my family has a totally different political opinion than my immediate does, and we just don't bring it up. And it's caused a lot of tension. And I think a lot of that is that both parties are just so, or both parts of the family are just so in their own perspectives. So I do hope in the future I will be surrounded by people who are willing to have open discussions and figure out what we all have in common more than what we have that divides us, because I think that will always help bridge that gap. So I do hope that, like Madeline referenced, our generation may be able to do that. I hope that continues. I hope civic engagement also includes kindness for one another, not just political division. So I think that's what I'd say.
I think we already see this in terms of, social media and the internet, how much education and awareness people are gaining. And so I'm really excited to see how that continues and how people continue to grow and learn and just become more aware. Yet I'm also conscious of the fact that that can cause, groupthink, and it helps misinformation spread quicker. So I think it's also important for us to see and hope for a balance in the future of people becoming more aware, but also doing their own research along with that, and just not going along with what they see necessarily online. And so it stimulates this push to learn, past the basic information that they gain from online resources.
All right, I have a couple more questions, but I want to just hand this over to you all. Does anyone have any questions for our brilliant panelists or issues, something you'd want them to talk about?
If the percentage is that good, what is that percentage of voters? The other thing is that what's the most prevalent way that information moves around for you or your group? Or
Yes, I do know the percentage. So I believe that we are at about 89% of eligible voters turn out to vote at St. Olaf. And then I can start the answer for the second part of that question. And I think that social media is a very prevalent way that messages are spread and ideas are spread around.
is there a certain site?
Oh, that's a good question. Do you guys have any? A certain site? Yeah, like social media.
Is it Twitter, or what do you guys look at?
I think TikTok is a big one. Twitter, Instagram.
I mean, I don't use social media, so I'm not the person to ask, but go ahead, Matthew. Do you have anything?
I don't have anything to add. I'm not on social media enough to have an accurate opinion.
Well, but yeah, I think that is a very powerful use of media on campus. Nobody advertises for student events even without putting something on social media. So even if you don't create physical posters, you're going to be posting on social media. And that, it is a really direct way to get people involved and just to see what you're up to, because they're going to be looking at it because they're on their phones and they follow your account. So it's very efficient. Yeah.
Another question? Thought? Yeah. How many hours do you sleep?
For me, I prioritize my sleep, so my schedule is a bit interesting. I make sure that Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I don't have any classes before 1 p.m. So usually I go to sleep at around 1 to 2 a.m. and then I wake up at 10:30, 11:30. So yeah.
I have gotten so much better at prioritizing sleep, especially this year. I get a minimum of 7.5 hours. I'm doing pretty good this semester so far. Who knows about final season? That might throw a wrench in the system, but.
I've been getting 8 to 10.
I'm a solid 7 hours a night girl. I don't know, we're all seniors, and I think I used to be really bad about getting enough sleep, but I don't know, I feel like as I've gotten a little bit older, the sleep is more important to me, so.
That's great. Do you talk about sleep? About the importance of sleep? Like I think I'm sort of astonished by your answer. So I didn't think that you were so responsible. But good for you. That's great. Another question.
Taking us back to social media, I'm curious about, as individuals, in our use, sometimes people are like, nobody's mind is changed by a post. But then some people say, I'm not posting for the audience. I'm posting so that I don't lose my own soul. And so I'm curious in terms of your own, like, what is responsible or active is, like, in terms of how active are you guys initiating or either resharing or creating new content?
Yeah, so I used to be more engaged with social media in high school, and when the whole Black Lives Matter movement was going on, all of my friends were posting things. I was as well, because I was just reading as much as I could, and I realized that I was kind of posting almost to, quote, fit in. I think that kind of speaks to your question, just because if I didn't say anything, then everyone would be like, oh, what is she thinking? Does she disagree? And so that was part of it for sure, but I also really was interested in all of those articles and things like that. But I will say, now that I've stepped back from social media, it was a choice, honestly, time management. If I still had social media, I would not get my 7.5 hours of sleep. So that was part of that decision, and I feel like there are other ways that I am politically active, and my absence in social media doesn't necessarily dictate that. But that took me a while to come around to, for sure. Do you have anything?
Yeah, I think it's really about intention. I agree with Emily, kind of like, what are you trying to gain, or what is your goal coming out of it? I think for me, a lot of the people I know are already posting, so I feel like at times I kind of am in a vacuum where it's like, oh, even if I post, it's not going to do anything. So if you want to come and talk to me, you're going to hear my stances, and you'll know where I stand and my views. So I don't really feel the need to post on social media. Yeah.
I think my experience has been different than a lot of people I know, because my dad was very intent on drilling into me the importance of minimizing my social media footprint. And so I've almost never posted anything, and so I will use social media, like I'll directly message people, but I don't send things out for the public, for the world to see. That being said, I have had experience with this kind of content as a consumer of information, and it has, like, I do appreciate it, especially for some of these new issues. And I think the most recent one that comes to mind is the October 7th Hamas attacks and the Israeli response to Palestine. At first, I wasn't nearly as informed as a lot of my other peers were about the issue. And so it was a way to get me a baseline of information from which I could go do some more reading when I had more time. So I think from that perspective, it can be highly useful if you're sending out good quality information.
This is kind of tricky because I have approached it from two different ways, because I do see a lot of posting on social media as activism as being kind of performative, where it's easy. You're not actually doing anything, but it's very easy to just hit repost and not practice whatever it is that you are posting in your daily life. And so I know for me, like, I have taken a step back from posting as well, but sometimes I still do if there are, especially like statistics related to politics that like grab my attention, and I'm like, oh, maybe people would like to see that, but it is kind of, I think what Praise was saying is kind of an echo chamber, because everyone who I engage with on social media is going to have similar views to me, and so I don't think that there's a lot of learning that goes on within the social media sphere. But
So to work against that temptation of groupthink and only having one perspective on an issue, what are some of the other tools that you might use to try to expand your worldview?
One of the easiest ways to do that is to get a non-homogeneous social media profile. I mean, I'll be the first one to say I don't know the details of how the algorithm works, but I've responded to enough material that from sites that I definitely disagree with, oftentimes knowing that I would disagree with it, that the algorithm gives me content from both sides, and I will disagree with a lot of it, but it's interesting and probably good to at least see what at least some of them are saying. I don't have a good conception of how mainstream versus extreme it is, but it's at least something. So that's one relatively easy way you can keep yourself mildly grounded.
I would say having discussions in person with people and feeling able to disagree with them and knowing that it's not going to destroy your relationship with them. That is something I'm still learning. I'm very good at supporting other people and saying, okay, that's what you think. That's okay. I just won't offer my opinion right now because I feel like it may burn a bridge. But it's okay to disagree with people and have an intelligent conversation with them. And that is where learning happens. When you know, you appreciate each other very much, you just have an idea that is different. And typically when I talk through these kinds of discussions with people, I'm like, oh, okay, I see why you see it this way, because maybe your parents were living this way, or maybe this is the political climate you grew up in, and that's just totally different from my experience. It doesn't mean that you're a bad person or that I'm a bad person. So those in-person discussions, I think I'm aspiring to have more of those. That would be my tool of choice.
Yeah, I think I agree with Emily. I think one of the biggest ways is just having those conversations. I think one of my issues, I could say, with St. Olaf is that we don't really have disagreements or those conversations inside or outside of the classroom. And I think it's important for people to challenge their beliefs and be able to defend them, to hear from others, to gain insight, and then to gain that reflection on where those beliefs come from. I think also reading is very important. Kids these days don't read. There's this quote from online, but I think it's important to get back to the books or resources online to read and again challenge what you've been told or what you think is true. So.
Praise, can I follow up on that and just ask about why do you think at St. Olaf you haven't had these interactions and disagreements and conflicts?
Minnesota nice.
Enough said. Yeah.
yes, I do. Kind of to speak to that is something that I've noticed a lot at St. Olaf, is that the difficult conversations don't happen. And I think part of that, Minnesota nice, but also we are a group of students with a fairly similar ideology. And so I work for the IFC, which is the Institute for Freedom and Community up on the Hill, and the organization is trying to bring in other speakers who might have some vaguely controversial ideas just to challenge people and make you think. And I think that that's valuable because there's a fine line between being harmful ideologies, but then I think there are a lot of issues where it's good for people to be challenged in order to better be able to back up their own opinions.
I was just going to add on to that my personal experience, I lived in Connecticut until I was in 7th grade, and so I very much did not grow up in the Minnesota or Iowa nice mentality, and so it was a little bit of I don't want to say culture shock, but it was a different mentality when I got to here, because I was used to just being around people that were willing to have their opinions challenged. And there are a lot of times when someone would have an opinion that I agree with on the face, but for very different reasons. And a lot of people in Minnesota don't like having those challenged and aren't willing or wanting to defend them. So that was something that I had to learn and work on, and am definitely still working on.
I'm assuming that as political science majors, you are actively involved in this campaign. So may I ask, if you are, what are you doing to inform students about the issues? And secondly, to get them out to vote?
You two should start. Yeah. Okay, so in terms of information, one of the clubs that Emily and I run has recently joined, or we're sponsoring one of the local candidates, and we are bringing him to campus. We are sponsoring his spreading literature, and he's going to table and have a Q&A with students, and so they can engage directly with candidates. And then for bringing people out to vote, we are doing a lot of little events. We're holding a lot of little tablings where we yell at people walking through buildings. We're like, hey, have you registered to vote? Have you pledged to vote? And we have candy and stickers, and so they come talk to us, and we're there to answer questions, and it's actually been quite effective. We've gotten a lot of people who are like, oh, no, I haven't, but I can take 2 minutes and register to vote right now.
Yeah, Madeline and I are in a class with a professor, Chris Chapp, which is kind of the whole point of that class is to get people out to vote. And so one of the activities that we've been doing is contacting people and getting them to fill out a pledge to vote form where they make some sort of plan to vote in a particular way, whether it's absentee, early voting, or voting in person, and then we are to follow up with them and do our best to make sure that people are voting. And with an entire class of people, and I think there are actually 1 or 2 other classes that are doing that. Yeah, that's part of how we get up to our 89%, or hopefully even higher this year.
Yeah, I haven't done any door knocking or anything like that per se, but I have spoken to a lot of friends. I'm saying, have you pledged to vote? I'm kind of being like an informal election ambassador in that way. I could be formal. Matthew's always reminding me I could be formally doing this. But yeah, I voted absentee already, so I've sent my ballot in the mail, and I have spoken with friends too about encouraging them to do that if they want to vote in their home state, if that's an option for them. So a lot of word of mouth from my part, I would say, but then also the direct engagement with local candidates, and yeah, I think that's what I would say. And I'm hoping to volunteer on actual voting day because St. Olaf has a voting location. So I want to help out in some way on that day since my ballot will have already been counted by that time.
Yeah, so in my role with Residence Life, we did a voter registration event where, residents could just come and register if they hadn't, and then also do the little pledge to vote thing that Emily was talking about. And then I think word of mouth as well, just, if I hear somebody saying, oh, I haven't registered, and you're from Wisconsin, we may want to do that just because of how contentious this election is. So, yeah.
One of the other things that people in this class or in our other programs can do is provide information. I mean, some of this information is just going to be, how do I vote if someone lives in another state and wants to vote there? How do I vote there? What do I need to do? But also, what elections do we have to vote in? Because sometimes people won't know whether their vote will count more in Minnesota or wherever they live, and that highly depends on what they value and if they're more engaged in their local candidates. And one of the other things that is hardly ever talked about is this year there are a load of ballot initiatives.
You're going to bring it up.
Yes, you did. There are a ton of ballot initiatives all over the country. A lot of them are very important. There are 11 states that have various abortion-related initiatives. Nebraska has 2. There are several. I think there are 5 states that have ranked choice voting ballot initiatives, which is a reform which is aimed to make elections a lot less, polarized by changing some of the incentive structures in primary systems. Let's see, there are a ton of really cool, really important ballot initiatives. There's one in here. Emily can talk about it if she wants, or I can talk about it.
Yeah, so is a ballot initiative on the Minnesota ballot voting if you would like to continue to have the lottery funds, or the profits from the lottery that the government gets dedicated towards environmental issues. So this is like contributing towards clean air, clean water efforts, and that has been the source or the deposit of that money for the past, I think, like, what, 15 years. So this is a vote that you get to say yes or no to extend that, I think, indefinitely, or at least for the next 50 years. So that just keep an eye out for that. Yeah.
Can I ask a question? It's a follow-up, I think, on what you've implied. I'm curious, have any of you, and I'm a student of the 60s and 70s, where we protested, we physically went to places. Have any of you been involved in protests? And what's your viewpoint on the effectiveness of protesting physically, carrying signs, and I'm hoping, not violently, but what's your involvement and what's your viewpoint on the efficiency of protests, student protests?
That is an awesome question.
Yeah, I have been involved in protests, climate protests, protests for Palestine. And in terms of effectiveness, I think it shows awareness of the general population. It shows that people aren't being idle, that, they know what's going on and they want to have a say about it. In terms of getting government to change, I really think it depends on the situation. You think of, there was the March for Our Lives protest for gun control that happened in 2018 after the Parkland shooting. And we see how, because of lobbies and whatnot and the money, nothing has really happened in terms of gun control regulation. So I think, yeah, it's hard. I think it's complicated. Yeah, it's complicated.
Yeah. I would say that I think there's a lot of power in protest, nonviolent protest. Madeline and I, our environmental coalition, recently organized a trip over to Carleton because they were hosting 2 German climate activists. They literally came to the States, have been traveling around for a couple weeks, and they spoke about their experience with the protests for climate change. And if you've heard of Greta Thunberg, that whole movement in Europe, they were instrumental in making that happen in Germany, which was mind-blowing to me. It was so cool to see that they were part of that, and they were telling us how awkward it is at first. They were like, we showed up, we didn't know that we should bring music, so we were just silently walking, and it feels uncomfortable sometimes in the moment, but then you look back at what they've done, and it's a huge movement. So many people are aware of it, and it shows that the world, a lot of people, especially young people, are so ready for things to change. And without protests at that scale, and for that long consistently, I don't think that message would be as clear. So I think messaging especially, it's very powerful.
We have 2 more questions.
Oh, okay.
I just want to ask about the relationship between Christianity and politics. There was a lot in the paper this morning about that, and a lot of young people, how you see Christianity and the way the movement is going around the country. I know you're in an isolated area, but do you think it should be from the pulpit? Are you getting turned off by Christianity because of the politics? What are your thoughts on that?
You want to go first?
That's a really good question. I should have been more prepared for it.
Yeah, we can pass it around too if you're not prepared to go.
Yeah, no, listen to your Hassan. Okay, yeah, this is a tricky question because I see it in 2 different ways. Because I see one party as taking Christianity and using it to further their political agenda or to kind of as a campaign tool. But then I also see congregations as a really powerful space to have conversations and then also to mobilize civic engagement. I know my parents are part of a congregation back home, and that's a very a place where they do have conversations about politics, kind of like what we're having right now. And I think that that's a good space where people have shared values and are able to come together and speak to it. But I do think it is frustrating when I see politicians using Christianity as a tool.
Yeah, I think, honestly, it's unfortunate the way Christianity has been embroidered recently in terms of politics in the States. I mean, when you think about it, the first fruit of the Spirit is love. And I would say, certain parties don't show that in terms of their policies, in terms of their values. And it's just so interesting because it's almost like people don't believe that, Christ can place people in positions of power to change. When you think about Joseph, when you think about people like Daniel and how the Lord used them, even in spaces that were not necessarily fully Christian, to cause change and affect policy. It's interesting how there needs to be, people think that there doesn't need to be a lack of separation between church and state, and how there needs to be Christian nationalist governments and whatnot. I think it's unfortunate, and yeah, just a lack of love for diversity. When you talk about the importance of having different organs, we have different organs in terms of the heart of the community and the church. How you have a pastor, you have an usher, you have whatnot. And diversity is important to the Lord in all manners. And so I think it's unfortunate how that isn't recognized by a lot of people who say they are Christian. So yeah.
I can speak to it. Do we want to go into the next question?
One more question.
Okay, perfect.
Hi, thanks for being here. I'm considered a townie, and I know we're talking about national politics, but what is your feeling on involvement on the Hill as it relates to our local politics? Invariably I hear in my coffee groups, somebody will say, well, yeah, this person will carry everything, but they don't get the Hill. And there's always seems to be support that varies as it relates. So do you get informed enough up there? And should our local candidates be spending more time up there?
Yes.
You from Iowa, the young fellow from Iowa, I had a nice visit with him. And, does he care who's really going to be mayor of Northfield? And, you don't know probably either one of them. So I asked, I like your answer right away.
Yeah, personally, I'm voting back home in Iowa this year, and so I definitely know more about my hometown local politics than Northfield local politics, but I do also get the sense that that a lot of people on the Hill are more engaged in national politics than local politics.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with this. And so that's something that in my job as an election engagement coordinator, we are trying to educate people about voting down ballot. And there are a lot of people who I've run into who don't want to vote because they don't want to vote in the presidential election. And that's frustrating because then we have to talk to them and say, well, there are a lot of other things on the ballot this year. There are a lot of other candidates who you will or you can be voting for. And so speaking to what you said, I would love to see more local candidates on campus. That's something we're trying to do, but also, unfortunately, St. Olaf can be a little stubborn about political candidates coming to campus, and so there's a lot of processes we have to go through in order to make that happen, and so I think that acts as a barrier to getting students engaged with local politics.
I think we also have a lot of academic focus on national politics and global politics. I have a professor, Paul Jackson, who would love to teach a local politics class because we don't have anything in that type of scale. So more appreciation for the local politics would be great. But yeah, I think it is also difficult because we are here for 4 years. We don't live here forever. We even go home in the summer. So the things that may affect you guys very, very deeply may only affect us for a few months at a time. So that is really difficult, knowing that like a large group of your voting community are people who live on the Hill or in Carleton and go home for the summer. And that's an issue I think we could talk about more, like our vote. If you're voting from Northfield, it does affect people here, so it is worth it to do your research and to talk to community members. I think, I'm a big advocate for that.
Yeah. Can I just jump in? I just want, for those of you who are concerned about this topic, I can tell you in the last 2 weeks, I've spoken to 3 different students about bike lanes and school bonds. There are some students at St. Olaf who care the issues that are, and they're trying to inform themselves. And so there is a way that I find that really hopeful, and they are brilliant and thoughtful people. Did you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think we definitely could do better in terms of local politics and local events. Me and Emily are in this class called Courageous Resistance, and we were researching and advocating for Viking Terrace, which is a community here who, has been kind of victimized by their landowners, you could say. And I had no idea before this class, and it's quite unfortunate. I mean, they're like, 15-minute walk from us, is it? Yeah. They're right there, and I had no idea until this class. So I think I could definitely do better, and the general population could do better in terms of learning more about Northfield. Yeah.
May I just say quickly, I think people who are voting at Olaf are very educated. So don't worry, we care. I made it seem very cynical, but I just think that's the nature of a temporary student body. It's constantly circulating, but always new ideas and new potential for community and connection. So there is a positive twist. You're right.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for taking the time to talk with us, and please join me in thanking our brilliant